NHL Network has put out their top 20 list for centers, wings, defensemen, and goaltenders for next season. Which Predators players made the cut and which rankings do we take exception with? We're going to tell you on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Monday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, Emma and I are going to take a look at the NHL Network's top 20 rankings that just came out looking ahead to next season. We're going to talk about where a few of the Predators players ranked, and we're also going to tell you where we have some exception to their picks. Plus, we are in a big mood Monday, and we want to share some thoughts on sports reporting. Before we dive into all of that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Emma, we are going to jump in and we are going to talk Nashville Predators hockey. We're going to talk statistics. We're going to talk about the upcoming season. But it just feels a little bit difficult on this Monday to talk about any of those things. Of course, I'm sure all of our listeners know about the tragedy that happened with Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau on Thursday night into Friday, passed away. They were hit and killed by a man who has been charged with the specific charges, I don't know, but basically driving intoxicated. He hit and killed them both on the night before their sister's wedding. So we just want to start this episode by, first of all, just acknowledging what is really going on in the hockey world, because today I think it's a very good reminder that this community that we are a part of, it's not about statistics and it's not about wins and losses. And you know what? Honestly, today it's not even about the Stanley Cup. It's about the community. It's about the really good people who make this sport and this culture better. And that really is who Johnny Gaudreau was.
Yeah, I know that we both have had a really difficult time with this. And, I think it's one of those things that speaks to, it sounds cliche, but the hockey world really is very small and it really is like a family. And even if you don't know someone personally, you know someone who knows someone, or it's just easy for you to imagine that happening to someone who is close, even closer to you. And it's, I just can't even fathom what that family is going through right now. It's one of those things that every detail you read about it, it just gets worse. And nothing about this is fair. It's just, you never want a tragedy like this to happen to anyone. But especially, such a beloved person or two people and a beloved family. So it's just, I'm wanted to make sure that we do mention that before we get into talking about hockey, just because some things are just a lot more important than hockey. So I know our thoughts, our prayers are with the Gaudreau family and their friends and everyone who's been affected by this. In a way, it feels like we all have been, just as being part of the hockey community. But, it is one of those things that It's a tragedy, of course, but it's one of those things that kind of makes you realize how special this community is, and makes me at least grateful to be a part of it.
I agree. I agree. And again, like there's no way to make this right. There's no way to make this okay. You don't really get a silver lining in a situation like this. The one thing that I hope is that for hockey fans, I hope for everyone, but especially hockey fans, this will be something that is a reminder that if you've had a couple of drinks, get an Uber. Let this horrible thing be something that prevents another horrible thing. But again, like Emma said, our thoughts are with their families, with the Columbus Blue Jackets team, that franchise, his former teammates, his current teammates. It's just been a really rough time in the hockey community. So just want to send our thoughts, our condolences as well. And we're going to try to pivot. We're going to try to talk about statistics and hockey and the Nashville Predators. But as we do that, just know that this is just it's a tough one, and that we realize that there are bigger things going on in the hockey world than top 20 rankings, which is what we are going to pivot and talk about right now. NHL Network has come out with their top 20 rankings for positions with off-season information, looking ahead, where do they rank everybody. And so we're going to take a look at where some of the Predators fell on this list. We're going to start with goaltenders. Interestingly, they only did a top 10 of goaltenders. I get that. There's only, so many to choose from. UC Saros on this list, Emma, comes in at number 9. What's your initial reaction to number 9?
Well, it feels a little low, but I also will acknowledge that I am biased. I think that anyone any one of us who watches UC Saros on a almost nightly basis like you and I do, we're going to have a little bit of a skewed opinion and perspective on that. I think this kind of does bring up, sort of the age-old debate about playoff experience and playoff performance and how much that factors into these things, and not because goalies are solely responsible for getting their teams to the playoffs and through the playoffs, but because the less playoff experience you have, the less time you spend on the national stage, where there
Right.
are, there's a platform for you to be seen by a larger audience. And so I think that it is unfair to people like UC Saros, who I think we can agree, I feel like I can speak for you, Anne, when I say I think he should be a little higher than 9th.
Agreed. Yep.
But again, the lack of playoff experience with the Predators, that I think has unfortunately come back to bite him. Of course, he's also coming off of statistically his worst season, so I won't argue that. But again,
Say it, girl.
it's a point I bring up a lot, but I feel like it needs to be said. If your worst season, you still finish 5th in the Vezina voting when there are 3 finalists, I'll take that. I'll take that any day if that's your worst.
There's not a team in the NHL that wouldn't probably take that. And if you look beyond, save percentage, and some of those statistics, you have to look at the workload that UC Saros carries. Last season, he led the, goaltenders in games played, most shots faced, most saves made, most minutes on the ice. So it is a very heavy workload for UC Saros in front of a team that I think struggled to get their groove. Of course, they got it towards the end of the season, but UC Saros struggled to find his groove. Some other players in front of him struggled to find their groove under Andrew Brunette and his new system as well. So I really feel like we're going to see next season that last season's quote statistical worst season is probably going to be an anomaly. I do think that There's no contract hanging over his head. Although UC Saros, cool as a cucumber, you really have to wonder how much does do these things weigh on him. But contract situation solved, the future in net taken care of. There aren't going to be trade rumors surrounding UC Saros this season. The defense in front of him much more comfortable with what is expected of them. So I really feel like we're going to see a better season from UC Saros, and I think that's going to bump him up this list next off season. What do you think is going to change his ranking or his respect level? He's so the Rodney Dangerfield of goaltenders. Like, he gets no respect. They talk about his height and very little else. What is going to get him national respect, do you think, Emma? What does he have to do besides grow 4 inches?
I think it's pretty safe to say that's not happening.
Probably no.
But I think it just goes back to what I said earlier. I think he's got to get more national exposure. And the only way to do that is in the postseason. And that's not all on him. Obviously, it's not solely his responsibility to get the Predators to the postseason. But I think that's got to be square one. That's where you have to start. Because Nashville, as much as the Predators organization may not want to admit it or acknowledge it, or fans may not want to admit it or acknowledge it, this is not a traditional hockey market. And I don't say that as a criticism. It's not.
It's just what it is.
It's just what it is. And so, you're not New York, you're not Chicago, you're not Toronto. You're not going to get the same level of exposure until you start reaching that next level. I mean, look at Tampa, also a non-traditional market, but they have, they've got that elevated exposure now because they have had such a good team for so long, been in the playoffs more, kind of been in the spotlight more. And, and it's not to take away from the talent level on their roster. I'm just saying that the Predators have some pretty serious talent as well. It's just not being showcased on the national stage.
It'll be interesting to see with the additions in the offseason if the Predators can make a deeper postseason run and can make some more noise in the playoffs, how that affects the way people view somebody like UC Saros when he is in kind of that bigger spotlight. So it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on in the regular season and hopefully into the postseason a ways. We're really hopeful. Coming up, we're going to take a look at where Roman Josi ranks among NHL defensemen, and we're going to discuss the one position where Nashville didn't make the top 20 at all. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Emma, one of the guys from the Nashville Predators who made the top 20 that should be no surprise, the captain, Roman Josi. Roman Josi came in at number 4 in the top 20 defensemen. Number 1, just running through these real quick, Makar. 2, Quinn Hughes. 3, Victor Hedman. 4, Josi. 5, Miro Heiskanen. Yada, yada, yada. Just want to throw out Matthias Ekholm, number 16. Edmonton and Colorado were the 2 teams that had 2 defensemen in the top 20. So that tells you something. I think this is kind of an interesting ranking. I do think, obviously, as somebody who was a Norris Trophy finalist, you've got to have him in the top 5 for sure. Josi again came in at 4. He had a little bit of a slower start last season. I think it took him some time to sort of adjust and find his game. 82 games played, 85 points, led Nashville in assists, in power play points, in blocked shots, Watch the moneymaker, Roman. Led the team in time on ice, and has been a Norris finalist 3 of the last 5 years. What I find interesting about him at number 4 is that he is behind Victor Hedman, who had fewer points than Roman Josi last season. Very similar stats when you're looking at defensive numbers. They give some credit to Victor Hedman just because of his longevity. He has been consistently very good for a long time, but he's also then behind Quinn Hughes. And look, as a team that has played the Vancouver Canucks in the postseason, I think everybody understands that Quinn Hughes is very good. So don't not taking anything away from Quinn Hughes, but Quinn Hughes has had one breakout season. And Roman Josi had more goals than Quinn Hughes. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, Roman Josi has both longevity and he, outscored Quinn Hughes. It just feels like Roman Josi again. He's kind of the guy that's easy to maybe overlook because he's got both longevity. As Andrew Burnett said, he's not the shiny new defenseman toy, but he also has these great points, but nobody seems to kind of weigh that. It's like, what does Roman Josi have to do here, people?
Yeah, he's the one I would say even more so than UC Saros is kind of the Rodney Dangerfield who gets
Oh,
no respect because he's even had, he has won an individual award. He has won a Norris Trophy and been a finalist, multiple times. And I think that again, not to, get too into the numbers here, but I'm not a mathematician, but I'm just saying if the Norris finalists are the top 3, then should he not be in the top 3 of goaltender or not goaltenders, defensemen? I'm just saying. Um,
mhm.
5 just seems again, or 4 seems a little low.
It does.
For him to be in the top 5, it should be in the top 3. I'm just saying. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, I think I mean, I rack my brain about this because it's like, okay, yes, he's just kind of that level, like, we just come to expect that level out of him year in and year out, so maybe that's why he's not getting the awards or the attention or the whatever, but, like, I don't know, I try to make comparisons and, obviously, as a player, he's not a comparison, but if you think of a similar player in the sense that we just come to expect a certain caliber of play out of them every single year, even though it's far and away better than, you know, other players at their position. Think like Connor McDavid, and I'm not saying that Roman Josi is Connor McDavid, but like he is someone that you could say like, well, the expectations for him are probably unrealistic, and yet he still meets them every year, and he
Yes.
still kind of gets that respect. And again, there is no true like one-to-one comparison for Roman Josi, but I think that again, unfortunately, and it seems a little too easy, and I don't want to blame only this, but it seems like the obvious answer is the lack of playoff exposure, the lack of deep playoff runs for people to really get an appreciation for this guy on the national level.
Yeah, I agree with you. As we were prepping for this episode, I was thinking to myself, what does he need to do to get that national respect consistently? When a national broadcast covers the Predators, they'll talk about how good Roman Josi is, but this is not a player who is in conversation on, shows when they're just talking about defensemen. He just doesn't come up. And I'm with you. I think a little quicker start out of the gate will help him this season. But I agree with you. I'm like, I think all the guy needs is for this team to make it into the playoffs, for people to really catch a glimpse of what is consistently good about Roman Josi. And I do understand the comparison you're making with Connor McDavid, because I think in some ways, even in Nashville, we are numb, I think, a little bit to just what we have in Roman Josi, because he just always is the guy doing the things. and you just come to expect that that is his game, and you forget, like, this is not your typical defenseman. This is not somebody that every other team has.
Well, especially when you mentioned his goal scoring, and this is a debate that will continue for a long time about whether the Norris Trophy should go to the best offensive defenseman or what have you.
Mhm.
That's another discussion for another time, but I think regardless of where you land on that debate, I think yes, you look at his offense, but he's also incredibly good in his own zone.
Yes.
He's not just scoring goals. I mean, he is everywhere out there. And it's just he ages like a fine wine. Just seems to get better and better. No signs of slowing down. And I think that that's something that, should be factored in as well. I know we all, like, everyone always says with any of these awards that, like, you know, Norris Trophy, Vezina Trophy, Calder Trophy, whatever, they all are regular season awards. They are
Mm.
based on regular season performance. True, but
But
I think it's a little naive to think that postseason performance doesn't factor into them at all. And I'm not to say it's not to say that one guy can completely disappear all season and then show up in the playoffs and win the Norris Trophy. But I think that the more chances you have, the more chances the voters have to lay eyes on these guys, the more it's going to influence their opinion.
yes, and I think that carries over from one postseason into the next season because voters are watching those players a little bit differently. Talking about players who age with fine wine, let's talk about two wingers that made the top 20, a little bit lower in the list. Steven Stamkos, Nashville Predators, Steven Stamkos, number 13, and right behind him at number 14, Philip Forsberg, right there, 13 and 14. Y'all, if you want to know what's going to be fun about Nashville this season, Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, like, this offense, I think, has the potential to be very, very fun to watch. How do you feel about where those two land in the big picture of wingers in the league?
I'd say that's probably about right. I honestly it's hard because with wingers, there's so many more of them
Oh my
than
gosh.
there
Yeah.
are, other positions. But I think honestly, for Stamkos, I might think that's even a little low, maybe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I'm not gonna take too much issue with it. I think Forsberg will be the one to watch this year, especially because, well, I mean, they both will, because Stamkos will be with a new team, obviously, for the first time in his career. Forsberg kind of had, I hesitate to call it a breakout season last year because we already knew that he was kind of that level, or he had that level in him, but it was like finally he had a year where he wasn't held back by injuries. He set a new franchise record in goal scoring. It just seemed to, like, a new level to him just kind of got unlocked this last year. So I think it'll be, if he can show some consistency with that and maybe perform at that level, year in, year out, we could probably see his ranking go up even higher.
Yeah. I think the All-Star game also did a lot for Philip Forsberg because it felt like everybody came away from the All-Star game that wasn't a Nashville Predator, that didn't know Philip Forsberg, going, "Oh, Philip Forsberg." And we're all like, "Oh yeah, no, that's just what he does on a Tuesday night." Like, that's just Tuesday night with Philip Forsberg. This is just what he does. So it's going to be interesting to see where Forsberg and Stamkos end up landing as this season goes on. Of course, adjustments coming up for Steven Stamkos. We'll see if Philip Forsberg can continue to build on what he did. So, where did Nashville fall short in these NHL rankings? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to share with you our big Monday mood. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Fall is just around the corner, and if you're looking to make that last minute summer event or you want to make plans for fall fun, you have got to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to get tickets for your favorite sports, comedy, music, and theater events. Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Football, of course, kicking off. And if you want to check out local collegiate games or a Titans game, you can get great seats at Game Time. Game Time is going to give you a view from your seat so you know up front what you're getting. And when you toggle on the all-in pricing feature, you're going to see your total up front, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Emma, there is one list where Nashville was a big fat no-show. And this probably won't surprise anybody, despite having thrown $8 million at it over and over and over again. Nashville does not have a single center in the top 20 list. I mean, and here's my question for you, Emma. Can the Nashville Predators really be a contention team if they don't have a top 20 center?
That's the actually the $8 million question, I think. And it's been one that has not, had an easy answer for this team over the last several years. I think that's kind of been the one thing that, and people just like to kind of latch onto one issue. It's like, oh, if we can just fix this, if we can just get this taken care of. And it seems like in Nashville, that has kind of been the focus. That's where people are at. It's like, we need a center. We need an elite level center. And even, no disrespect whatsoever to Ryan O'Reilly, who has been fantastic for the Nashville Predators in his first season there. Talked about unlocking a new level to Philip Forsberg. I think Ryan O'Reilly has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But he's not a traditional top line center, I mean, it's one of those things that, you like to think that maybe you can get by without it, but just, it does kind of seem like year in and year out, that's kind of a missing piece.
Right. And we've talked about Steven Stamkos coming in saying, yeah, I would be comfortable going back and playing center. So there is that option. Of course, we've talked about, is Tommy Novak going to get an opportunity to be that second line center if Stamkos stays on the wing? And what would that look like for the Nashville Predators? But and look, adore Tommy Novak. I think he's a late bloomer, and I know there are people who hate his contract, but I think there is another level for Tommy Novak that we're going to see. But I'm not sure Tommy Novak is going to do anything this season to crack the top 20 list next offseason either.
No.
So it's like this is the thing, and so many championship teams have been built around having that elite center. And that's just something Nashville still doesn't have. Are they going to be able to overcome that and make a deep postseason run here in the next couple of seasons? Can they win a Stanley Cup without getting a real, true, proven top line center? I think that's one of the biggest questions about this team. And Barry Trotz has put together an amazing team, but that's kind of the missing link right now.
Yeah, it's kind of, no one wants to speak in absolutes at this point when this season hasn't even started yet. But I have to wonder, I have to think that, the way it's being portrayed outwardly right now is, oh, we'll see where Stamkos fits, we'll see if he's comfortable. We'll play him wherever it makes the most sense. And I'm like, I have to think that behind closed doors, the conversation is, oh, he's playing center.
Oh, we 100
Like,
we gotta have you.
yeah.
We really need you.
Yeah, I think it would do a lot, not just, I mean, because everything, it kind of has a ripple effect, like even if he plays center, that doesn't just, solve your center problem, but it also, it opens up a new opportunity for someone like a Luke Evangelista to maybe play higher up the lineup. It, opens up new opportunities for other players to move around. And I think that, obviously we've talked about sometimes on paper something sounds great and then you execute it and it's like, oh no. That could very well happen with Steven Stamkos at center, but I have to imagine that at least at this point that's got to be the plan.
Yeah, that's gotta be plan A, you would
Yeah.
think. That
Yeah.
that's gotta be what they try first because he is their best shot at having an elite centerman. So, something that's gonna be one of the big storylines, I think, in training camp is where does Steven Stamkos end up playing? And again, one of the big storylines, I think, for this Predators team, even with all the additions that Barry Trotz has made, is going to be how far can they go without an elite center? Oh, Lord, that's gonna be one whole thing to watch. We were going to post this episode on Friday. We had technical difficulties, and by that, I mean the electricity in my house went off about 6 times, and there were words said, and, so we had a big Friday feeling, but we're now changing that into our big Monday mood because Emma and I want to talk about something, and it's something that we see consistently in sports media. It's something that we try to be mindful of. And then maybe just as a gentle and friendly reminder, maybe we would like some other people in sports media to understand the difference between speculating and reporting. Two very different things, my friends.
Yeah, well, I would say first off, I would like consumers of sports media to understand the difference and,
Facts. Yeah.
look at the way that things are framed. There's, and even within speculation, there's different levels. There's just pure, straight up speculation. There's uninformed speculation. There is informed speculation. And I think it's important to note the difference there too. And, especially during the off season, it's kind of rumor season because there's
Yeah.
not as much else going on for us to talk about. And rumors are a fun part, whether it's trade rumors, free agency rumors, whatever it is. Um, it's always a fun exercise to kind of engage in these rumors and dissect them and talk about what makes sense and what doesn't. But, and I know I'm not the first person to make this argument, but I think that social media in particular has become such a double-edged sword for journalists because it is a fantastic tool for dissemination of information and for brand building as journalists, but it also it gives everyone an
Mhm.
equal platform. And with the specifically with Twitter and the sewer that Elon has turned it into, it seems a bit like, now that you can buy verification, and,
Right.
it's not necessarily earned, um, pretty much anyone can say whatever they want on there. And that's part of what's, you know, great about it is that everyone should have a platform to speak and, to share their thoughts. But when it comes to things like reporting news, it is important where you get your news from. And,
Right.
it just feels like we've gotten so far away from quality journalism, from ethics, from integrity. And, initially we had this conversation that kind of stemmed from there was a air quote rumor going around about a potential trade between the Predators and the Edmonton Oilers. And I just remember hearing about it and thinking, like, where did this come from? Did someone, was it Elliot Friedman or somewhat Frank Saravalli, like a known, trusted NHL insider who was like
Who would
leaking this
know?
information.
Right.
Yeah.
Kevin Weeks'
And
forehead.
right. And instead, I'm like trying to track down the origin of this rumor. And it turns out it came from a, an article that was a very well written article about, here is why player X would make sense as a trade acquisition for this team. Totally fine exercise to engage in during the offseason. Here's why this team should go after this player, or here's why they shouldn't. But some fans or readers, consumers, whoever, took that and kind of spun it into a rumor. And this reporter was not reporting anything with this.
Right.
They were just kind of laying out an argument for here's why this would make sense. And just because a writer or reporter lays out an argument for something, that doesn't mean that they are reporting anything. And I think it's, that's kind of where this big Monday mood started for us. I think it reaches an entirely new level after the events of this past week and the tragic passing of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, and the fact that, I mean, obviously different scenario, but I think there were so many rumors swirling around that happening, and people were getting angry. Like, fans were getting angry with journalists, with the journalists who are actually the ones with ethics and integrity. They're getting angry at them, tweeting at Elliot and at Pierre and saying, "Hey, where are you guys? We need to know. We need to know what if this rumor is true." And it's like, okay, first of all, respectfully, no, you don't.
No, you don't. No,
These
you
are
don't.
human beings that we're dealing with. They're not just hockey players or just figures in the media. They are people. They're fathers, they're sons, brothers, husbands. You do not you have not earned anything. You are not owed anything when it comes to their lives. And also, it is the journalist's job to vet information, verify information before continuing to feed this rumor mill. And in this particular case, it's very unfortunate that the information about the deaths was leaked from an employee at the medical examiner's office. And that's how it even reached social media before it could be verified. And under no circumstances should social media be finding out about something like that before their own families do.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's the thing that, so many things about that situation were upsetting to me, but one of the biggest ones was people getting angry on social media and attacking the real journalists, saying, "Where are you guys? Why aren't you telling us this?" It's like, well, because there's nothing to tell yet. And if there was, then we would be telling you. And the fact that we're not is an indication that this information has not been properly verified yet. And so, as journalists with ethics, we are not going to share anything that is not ours to share until it's the appropriate time.
Yes. And that goes for a number of things. And the situation with the Gaudreau family is just such a highlight of be mindful where you get your information and be mindful of why you may not be getting the information you want immediately, because there is this race to be first, but there is also the most important thing is to be right. And so, there are some sources that I think you can lean more heavily on when it comes to information about this. But we've heard of players who found out they were traded on social media. Their agent hadn't even called them yet. They hadn't spoken with the team yet. And so I think it's just a good reminder that people who may say something, and I agree with you. I think Twitter is kind of the place where this is the worst, where this is happens the most and is the most challenging. Just because somebody says it doesn't mean that it's true, and it is hard to get things right. And it's important to get things right. And so if you don't get information immediately, it may be because they're waiting to verify something The other thing I will say is that volume doesn't equal wisdom. And just because somebody says something loudly doesn't necessarily mean that they are correct. Just because someone says something more aggressively doesn't necessarily mean their information is correct either. So it's just a gentle Monday mood reminder that reporting on these things is an ethical process and it's not easy. And while there have been times where Emma and I have heard, much smaller scale Nashville Predators rumors, it's important that we take time and get things right. And that goes across the board for everyone. So that is just our gentle Monday mood reminder to everybody. Just be mindful of the bigger picture and be mindful of what you're consuming and your demand for more information. That's what we have to talk about on this Monday episode of Locked On Predators. Coming up on Wednesday, Emma and I are so excited to introduce to you one of our very favorite voices in sports. Paige Martin is going to join us. We're going to be talking about the Wild Western Conference next season as well. So make sure you tune in and join us for that. Before we sign off today, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on the social media sewers at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me in the sewer at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're going to be back on Wednesday with an all new episode. We will see you then.